Okay, welcome to the regular council meeting. The date is November 19th, 2024, and it's 7:01. And with that, I'll call the meeting to order. We had a closed portion of the meeting prior to this with nothing to report out. So with that, we'll move to the adoption of the agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Broughton, seconded by Councillor Abbott. Any amendments on the floor?
No. So,
No. Okay, all in favor?
aye.
Yes.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay, public participation. Anyone in the gallery that would like to speak or online? Okay, no one in the gallery, online. Okay, with that, we'll move forward then. Next item is the approval of the minutes of prior meetings. There are no minutes. So we'll move to business arising, none. Unfinished business, none. Reports. We'll move to staff and the bylaw enforcement officer report, page 3. Mr. Blackwell, anything to add?
Thank you. No, this is just information for council, just an update. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take that as read or received. Item number 2, Director of Operations. Sorry, Councillor Abbott.
A couple of questions on that. Item B on that report, Ross, says bylaw department provided recommendations for amendments to the garbage and recycling and collection bylaw. Can you tell us where that is? We haven't seen those recommendations.
Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you through you to Councillor Abbott. Staff are working on those and we expect to bring some draft revisions forward for council's consideration at the next council meeting, which I believe is December 17th, unless council chooses to move that December 17th meeting earlier to an earlier date in December, by the way.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions?
We're going to keep a few more.
Okay.
On item D, obviously been a dramatic drop off on parking enforcement violations. Part of those would be, there's been a drop on the numbers of people. But can you confirm or advise on bylaw working hours and weekends? Is that part of this? And what's happening there?
Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you through you to Councillor Abbott. The bylaw officer's schedule changes. It's adaptable and flexible. It will be adjusted to weekends when those weekends look like they're falling on weekends that are particularly good weather, or if there's a stat holiday that falls in proximity. The bylaw enforcement officer will be working those weekends. Otherwise, they'll be working primarily weekday shifts. And so this is all about being adaptable and flexible to the emergent needs in the community. So it's almost week by week at this point.
Is it possible the council could be appraised of those schedules?
Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. I can certainly add that to my to-do list. I will make every effort to provide that to council.
Thank you. One last one on number F. So where does that get left? So this is the parking enforcer made an attempt to gain access to registered owners' information through license plates from Alberta, and it was rejected. Is there any further action to be taken here? Do we just accept that? Is there a way to challenge this? I find it surprising that our bylaw cannot get access to, and is this the case for all municipalities?
Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. It was certainly a bit surprising to receive that response. So we are, when I say we, the bylaw enforcement officer is actually petitioning other local governments to see what they do about accessing out of province vehicle owners. So don't have an answer for you yet, but it's a work in progress.
And just one follow-up question. So previously we've handed these cases over to a collection agency. Do they have means that we wouldn't have as a municipality, or has that been considered as well?
Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you, through you to Councillor Abbott. That is the last resort. If we are unsuccessful in satisfying these outstanding citations, we then pass it over to a collection agency to follow up on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next item is the staff report, and that is reworking the water bylaw written by Mr. Burr to Mr. Blackwell with recommendations for a first reading of bylaw 633 and commentary on the amendments to bylaw 385. And hand over to you for comments.
Thank you. Well, that's pretty much the gist of it. The salient features of the new bylaw are largely to do with the fact that our system is now 60 years old rather than new, which is what the previous bylaw number 2 covered, how you connected to it, how you paid for it, what happened next. This is to address the municipality's need to force fixes, particularly on the private side, for property owners who either refuse or deny that they have a problem, or refuse to accept the data, or whatever. It just gives us a slew of new tools to accomplish that. That's pretty much all I have to say with it. The document is quite succinct, actually. It's been reviewed by legal counsel. I deliberately left the comments in for you to see the flavor of the discussion and the questions that we were trying to deal with. It's essentially a technical bylaw that's been drawn from a variety of similar municipalities to ours, similar age, similar materials, similar challenges, and then gone through by legal counsel to make sure that it's enforceable against modern constructs of the Community Charter and Local Government Act, and how courts have been dealing with things. So, and you will see that in some of the comments. Okay. The only other thing maybe I should point out is that the Schedule A, which is the rates that get approved on an annual basis, these ones will only be approved in April, Mayish of next year, once the water rates have been set. I've added significantly more property categories in response to input, feedback, requests from residents. They felt that the 4 property categories we had before, which was residences, which included multifamily, strata-based, large single-family homes. There was a business category, there was a marina category, and there was a school category, and that was it. So we've expanded on those somewhat. And you see those on page 16 of the agenda package. So just to say the piece altogether, there are multiple fees mentioned here. The fees are usually quite benign. They're sort of in the $50 to $150 range, and it's to make an application for a water connection or a disconnection or a hydrant permit or so on and so forth. Those will appear in the fees bylaw. You will be seeing that in the next, if not the next meeting, the meeting after. So I've been going through that on a sort of 3 or 4 rounds of proposed changes, which is something we do every year. Penalties are also discussed in the bylaw, and I took a shot at what those penalties might look like, and they are in the next document. Now, as I pointed out to you on the weekend, that document wasn't the markup of the previous bylaw, but that was separately supplied, and I believe that was added as not on table because you received it on Friday, but right. There's a marked up section that includes suggested changes to the bylaw enforcement notice bylaw.
So
okay,
I have a physical
copy if you want.
Mr. Blackwell, anything that you would like to add before we call on the counselors?
Thank you. No, nothing further. Thank you.
For the other document, is that in reference to the penalties?
Yeah, correct.
And are those penalties, have they always been in place, or have
No.
they been adjusted, or?
They have not, and that's been sort of a shortcoming of the previous bylaw, that it was just, fees, penalties were mentioned, but never stipulated anything.
And did you come up with these penalties, sort of looking at other municipalities?
Yeah,
or-
to a certain extent, yes, and also knowing the impact, online survey, what they imply, specifically around, driving us in the wrong direction during times of water supply. So, for example, I suggest, and this is not even a first reading, I'm just seeking commentary on these things, so if you think they're too high or too low, I'd like to hear that. So for example, I say, use water for power generation, $2,000 fine. Because that's a no-no. You cannot do that. Cell water are allowed to take and use or apply to or for use or benefit other than the user's own, $200 fine. So, you know, I try to make them proportional, but also taking into account how serious the offense is. I also, to be absolutely clear on things, some other bylaws, penalties, I've also taken a crack at, and they're marked up here, specifically the tree bylaw. Once again, the bylaw contained fines, and this bylaw contained fines, and they were different. So I've harmonized them with the bylaw. Specifically to remind you what happened there was staff about 8 years ago realized that people were essentially just paying the fine to cut down a tree. And so the fines were made quite significant to somewhat discourage that. In some cases, even that's no discouragement. People pay that $30,000 fine to cut down 8 trees. So that's in there, and you will see it. And then 1 or 2 more minor tweaks. And as I say, you have the red line strikeout version. And how I would ask for just to, if you could send me comments, and then I'll amalgamate them and put them into first reading draft for on the schedule that I propose in my report, which is to get them all done before I depart, all the readings, but the final adoption only when the rates have been decided for the budget.
Okay, Councilor Broughton.
How closely do these numbers align with other communities in the region?
Well,
You said that, you know, sort of a judgment here has been applied in
the
terms
penalties, you
of
mean?
the impact of penalties, yeah.
The large ones, they do not, because we're the only ones with it, because we're the only ones facing this kind of issue. Is somebody using our high pressure water for power generation? Don't know. That is a known occurrence in non-metered communities, and people, why not? May as well. Indoor water, once through water features, once through hydroponics. These are now specifically called out in the bylaw in sections mentioned. That previously it was just taken for granted that people knew not to do that. Now we tell them, and we give them a fine if they do. So I couldn't find a lot of parallels to meet these numbers because I couldn't find those offenses.
Those offenses out elsewhere, okay. And how about the tree bylaw, the numbers there?
That reflects what's in the bylaw today. What was in this penalty bylaw before it didn't match the tree bylaw.
Okay.
So that's what you see there.
Okay, because the bylaw officer's report included a report of a fine for whatever, and I didn't see I don't recall the breakdown of that.
I think his report said something like $7,000, and that was several trees.
Several trees, okay, consistent with the tree bylaw.
Correct.
I'd be interested in just seeing some comparables, if that was possible, of other communities, and if not, then just make a note of it, as a reference. I know our parking fine is quite a bit different than most other communities, so it'd be interesting just to see if we're above or on par with some of these other communities.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I might point out, you might want to take this opportunity to go through the entire penalties bylaw and see if there's things that you find online.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is we give it first and second reading next meeting, third reading the meeting after, and then adoption as convenient.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Abbott.
I've got some other questions on the other, but to that point, if I can just add in, so there are other bylaws that also need to be corrected and are not, the fees bylaw does not represent what's in the bylaw. So that, I thought that was coming from the
Fees or
bylaw
penalties?
officer.
Fees bylaw is coming,
Right.
but this is the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw, which is
Yes.
essentially the
The
penalties
penalties.
bylaw.
I'm talking about penalties.
Okay.
I might have said fees. And we've had that, some request on that before, so I think you should just touch base with Taj, because some of that has to be mentioned before.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, good point. I think the DCO and I will go through it as well.
Yeah, it's not only the trees.
Has the bylaw officer also gone through it, or is he?
No, but there's nothing really in here, other than his anecdotal advice that he feels that the high parking penalty is counterproductive. He hasn't commented on these specific amendments, no.
Okay. All right, I did notice those, and I was wondering how we arrived at those, so I'll definitely take a closer look at it.
The parking penalties?
No, just all of the penalties. I wasn't sure whether there was an existing list somewhere out there. Councilor Broughton?
When do we, through the chair, when do we see looking at the parking penalties? Is that
Well,
in place or in play?
there's no staff report on that per se, although I have seen one that was presented about 3 or 4 years ago by Tanith Lawton, who was the CAO at the time. I could dust that one off. She made some very cogent points about why the $290 fine was excessive.
Yeah.
At least based on feedback that she was getting from the public.
Right.
Is it 10,000?
I think it was.
No, that's way a long time. That was a long time ago.
It was some time ago.
Not more than 4 years ago.
That
Yeah,
was,
maybe.
that was 15 years ago.
You might want to go check that.
Well,
One thing I have noticed, we get lots of documents, and if you look at who the owner was, it's Tanith. Because she creates all these Word documents and they're not hers.
Yeah, I've got some older ones than that even. Yeah, maybe it's whoever it was 4 years ago.
Yeah, I
Not this
think,
year.
Okay, we'll get back
so
the
we
agenda, so
will be
you're just-
looking at the parking bylaw fees at some point.
That's
The
beyond
CAO
my,
has.
yeah, that's
Okay,
beyond my say so, but
Right.
I mean, certainly it's up to council if they'd like to take a look at it. Sure.
Mr. Blackwell?
Thank you. No, I can advise that this is something that I have been talking to the bylaw enforcement officer over, and that is preparing a report, a fairly comprehensive report around parking management and what makes sense and what doesn't in terms of the investment of staff time. So that's coming.
Okay, so that covers the 3 reports, the 3 bylaws?
The 2 bylaws, yeah, yes, as far as.
2 bylaws, sorry.
The rec is
3
to,
items.
give first reading to the water bylaw.
That's a recommendation. Okay,
To the water bylaw
At the
only.
next meeting.
Yeah, and comments to come. Solicit some comments.
sorry, repeat that again. First reading at the next meeting, or you're looking?
The
for
first
that now?
reading tonight.
Okay. All right, do we have a motion on
Yeah, I'll put the motion forward.
that? Okay, second.
I'll second.
Okay, Councillor Abbott moves the motion, seconded by Councillor Broughton.
So
Any
we-
further discussion?
Yeah, I've got a few comments.
Okay, Councillor Abbott.
Just before I go there, so let me get clear on the penalties bylaw, 385 or whatever it is. So what did we agree here? That's gonna come back with a more fulsome review of all the sections in it? Is that what we're asking for?
All I am asking for here.
I know you basically focus on the water, then you
The
added,
water one, and
you added in trees.
because I just happened to be going through it, I thought maybe this one's an obvious need to be harmonized with the bylaw.
Yeah.
But as you say, there may be others.
I know at least one other. So is that, maybe that's a question to refer to the CAO.
Yes, very well. Mr. Blackwell?
What's the question? I'm sorry.
Do we want to defer immediate consideration of bylaw 385, the penalties bylaw?
Until we looked at all the other sections, not just water, and as Carl pointed out, he also looked at the trees, but there are others that are also need to be updated and aren't aligned with the actual bylaw themselves.
So the short answer is chicken and egg. I think there's some that can be done now. There's some that would, I think, be better to wait for. I think Carl has a clearest feel as to what is urgent with regard to those, but some of the other charges and fees and penalties, I think, can come a little bit later. Carl?
Yeah. If I can embroider on that through the chair. So yeah, I think that's right. I need these ones to make the water bylaw work. I'm quite happy to drop the other ones from consideration for now, although they were just glaringly obvious. Because I happen to be looking up penalties for trees being cut recently. In order to make the water bylaw work, and as you know, the report says that it would only be adopted in May. We've got plenty of time to look at the penalties associated with it, but by the time it's adopted, penalties need to be in place.
All right, any further questions?
Yeah, just if we've got it open, I'd like to look at some of the other ones that also have been due to be looked at for some time.
Okay.
Okay, other questions going back to the water bylaw itself, not the penalties. On part 3, clause number 6, why do we feel it's necessary to stop someone from providing their own water through rainwater harvesting if they chose?
Yes, I asked the lawyer the same question. This was one of their inserts. There's nothing to stop them from doing that. But in order to protect future purchases of the property, it's almost like they need to adhere to the building code. Their property must be connected to the water system, is the answer I've been given.
Oh, I was thinking the same.
So they can't opt,
Why? Someone should be able to.
so they can't opt out, they would still have to pay the water fee.
That's where we're going with it, yeah. Yeah.
Even
They
if they
can't
didn't
opt
want
out
to.
of, if all property must pay the water fee.
Yeah.
Mr. Byrne.
If they choose
Also,
not
that
to
could-
use it, that's their prerogative.
My thought was, what if we have wells in the future or somebody were to put down a well?
Well,
it'd
the
still be
practicality of
required. I mean,
well,
that's probably a long ways off, but
yeah, the practicality of a well is you wouldn't have one within village limits because there's too many septic system plumes everywhere. You'd never get it licensed. It would have to be outside the village limits. And then it would be part of the village water system, needing treatment and
if
storage.
someone were to drill a well, it'd probably go down quite a depth. It wouldn't likely be close to surface, but an expert would know that. Councilor Broughton, you had a question?
I think I dealt with it.
Councilor Abbott?
Yeah, but so back to my original question is still. I don't just tell me. So you saying that somewhat like getting a building permit for future sales, you have to be connected to the water system
For future owners.
for future owners. But a future owner could just choose to connect to the water system.
They could. I read this one several times and thought to push back, and I'm happy to ask the lawyer one more time because I flagged that one as well.
Yeah,
I understand.
If it's
But Councillor Broughton did raise the point that you don't get to opt out of paying the water fee. You pay it regardless. As a Lions Bay property, you must pay the water fee. That is said elsewhere in the bylaw, I can't remember the clause.
And you have a water stub at the property.
Yeah.
Every property will have a water stub there.
Mr. Blackwell, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can tell you that through the building permit process, you're required by law to connect to municipal water and sewer and storm, like storm and sanitary, when those utilities are provided. When they're not, you're of course not required to, but where you are legally, you must. And that's driven through all kinds of things I won't get into. Case law, it's driven by litigation associated with failing systems. I mean, it's just a huge history as to where this came from. And so it's been standardized now. I think it's even in the BC Building Code that occupancy is, in fact, I'm sure of it. Occupancy requires connection to municipal water, where water is provided, and so on and so forth.
Don't have to
Okay,
turn it on.
yeah, Mr. Burke,
I think that's probably right, it's coming back to me, and I think that's where the 30-meter number comes from.
it makes sense.
It's not arbitrary, it's if you are within 30 meters, you're required to.
Okay,
Okay, well, I guess less so in our, environment, geography where we live, but I can just imagine in other jurisdictions, this would just be such a stupid decision where people have issues with providing water to the residents, and someone says, yeah, I'll take care of myself, and you say, no, you're not allowed to. Sounds bizarre to me that that's still the case.
Well,
Anyway, but we're not going to change it here.
Through the chair, I believe that's the case in Bowen.
Yeah.
You have an option of your own well.
In Bowen.
If your property meets certain criteria.
Right,
Requirements, sure.
okay,
and so, why wouldn't we do the same?
all right, I'll call a question
Okay,
on the
no,
first reading. Or
Sorry, no.
you have another question?
When you started.
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
I haven't got that many, I'm joking. 11A. Just the
What page
word,
are we on here?
10 of 58.
10, okay.
just the wording on this. So we're describing what materials can use, right?
Mhm.
And then we say polybutylene, PVC, LDP, plastic, iron, steel, except for stainless steel 304, 316, cannot be used. The problem is plastic, HDPE and PEX, which is ones you are allowed to use or should be using, are also plastic. So there's a contradictory statement.
Yeah.
So
I can take plastic out.
I think you need to fix that.
Thank you.
On D, now my own question, why does this currently exist? Does this currently exist everywhere? A readily accessible shuttle valve must be installed with a service connection into the premise. Yeah, prior to any connection outside, and such a shuttle valve controls all water from curb stop. So this is everywhere.
Yes, I have seen it in other bylaws, but it's very specific to our experience here is that we are often told by, especially people denying that there's a leak, that they don't have an isolation valve. So they can't switch it off. So there's no proof where the leak is. So this is the need to be able to switch off the house so we can isolate the
house to the curb stop.
the service line. Yeah.
So do we know that that's actually, have you come across examples where people do not have that? Other than this, you do.
Or they purport not to have it.
Report not to, but it is required when you pull a permit.
It now says in the bylaw you must. If you don't, sorry, we'll put one in for you.
And previously that was not in there.
Outside your house, not inside your house.
Well, it's typically right where the service line comes up into the house. It's still wrapped in some kind of, bituminous covering because it's been underground. And then there's a valve right there.
It's normally inside your house.
It's normally inside the wall,
Yeah.
close to where the line comes in.
All right, Councillor Abbott, any other questions?
You want to see it? Look down to mine.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Is it inside or outside the wall, right?
Kind of want it inside for non-freezing purposes.
On clause 28, bottom of page 12, the 2% discount. This is the standard 2% discount we have on everything.
Yeah.
So it should it really be in this bylaw? Isn't it dealt with
I,
elsewhere?
through the chair, I asked this very question 10 years ago, in a different role, and I was told it had to be in the bylaw.
Because if we decided to make it 3 or 2.5 or 1, then we're gonna have to go back and find
Change
in
the
all these
bylaw.
different bylaws.
Yeah.
Because it's dealt with in the fees bylaw.
It's also dealt with in Schedule A, can be changed. I believe the answer is that any discount on a standard fee needs to be agreed by council. By bylaw.
But we can agree within the fees bylaw, instead of having in all these different bylaws, yeah. The lawyer says it has to be in there, or did you actually ask that?
Yeah, no, yeah. So it does have to be in there. No, I did not ask the lawyer that. I was told that 10 years ago when I asked the same question.
So can you maybe ask check with the lawyer? Because I
Mr.
mean,
Blackwell, any comments on that?
Yeah, sorry, have no power here, so I'm on my phone now. And it's in the blackness, so there's no point in me putting my video on. As far as in my experience, all fees and fines and so forth are set out in those specific bylaws. However, things change all the time. So I think it's worth just double checking with our legal advisor just to ensure that what we're doing is the current standard.
All right, thank you.
all right,
It's easy enough.
yeah. Okay, item clause, we will go 13, page 13. So this seems like this could take a while to go through all of this. So what happens if we've got a large leak? You're gonna this could take a month before you can do anything.
Through the chair, this is one of the very clauses that I'm desperate to have in our quiver. This is the best we can do according to common law and the charter. So yes, it could take a while. But it's better than having no power to do it at all, which is what we currently have.
If there were an emergency situation, I would imagine you could shut off at the road if there was no residents.
Absolutely,
In the
and
village.
there's plenty of other clauses in here where we can switch off immediately for all kinds of reasons. Want of supply, contaminated water, et cetera, et cetera. But this is specifically for a leak in the service line, downstream of our curb stop, somewhere on the property. And it could potentially take a while to affect this tool, but then we can affect it. And we can force a repair.
Okay, any other questions?
Yep. Number 33A. So these are all much remembered dies for a reason of discontinuous service, or reasons such as. And then you got a lack or shortage of water supply. So that's not defined anyway. So what defines a lack or shortage? How's it quantified?
Yeah, well, I don't know how, through the chair, big pardon. I mean, that is essentially, we don't have order for demand. And we faced that very scenario this summer where we said we may have to shut off the water. When reading the bylaw to see, what we would code to do that, we didn't actually have the right. So this is.
It just, sorry, Carl, where I'm going with this, it seems like something that someone can challenge if you don't somehow define it. If you don't define it, how someone's just going to challenge it? Well, that's not a lack.
Every bylaw I've read, and I've read several, they have that exact sentence. So, but it's definitely worth asking if that is in fact too vague.
Too vague, yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Allen.
Okay, so my last question or group of questions is I highlighted your additional licenses for additional, and I would puzzle why you wanted to do it. You suggested earlier there's been a suggestion you need to. In my mind, I don't see the need for it because we have one marina, we have one office and store, and now I'm wondering is the cafe store different to the store?
Yes.
And why did we need to differentiate? Because we don't have any other businesses. I think this is just gonna make it more confusing.
Well, through the chair, we have at the moment, one more business, Marine Surf Center. But that's not to say we wouldn't have, businesses if we ever chose to do business licenses, based in homes. The idea is that they would have more people during the day, using water. And it would pay differently.
I can understand another municipality why there would be a difference between a cafe and a restaurant. There's a store because yes, they use more water. But in our case, it's one business license. Are they going to pay twice, or they're going to pay the higher of the two?
No, they're going to pay twice.
Okay.
Maybe less combined than they pay today. We would model that, but it would be a better division of the use of water.
So my question is, why do we need this given us current circumstances? And I go to the school as well. So if 1 year, if we only have 18 kids in the school because it's a bad year, they're going to pay less than the next year when they've got 21. I don't understand. We have one school, the numbers, they bounce around the same numbers. They're maxed out at 35, I think it is, but they're never quite there. They're always in the 20s. Why do we need to have a differentiation between lower than 19 and above 20? Each year there's going to be a change. I don't see the need for that.
Well, I mean, you will find out what their enrollment is when you send them the bill, and the bylaw accommodates that. So,
but we're never going to get another school. So why do we need to differentiate between a school below 19, below 20?
Because in years when they have 20 or more, they use more water. Not
marginal.
Well, I don't know what the number is, but if it's 30, they use a lot more than 17. And this is all to accommodate the absence of metering. Because we're trying to...
They don't use any in the summer.
We take that into account. Or they do water the field. But that's a flat use every year, independent of the number of students.
Right. And that's a village asset as well. Yeah. Shared asset. Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm fine to amalgamate them, but the idea is that higher users should pay more.
If we had lots of different businesses and licenses, I understand that, and we had 3 different schools, and I'd understand why another municipality might need it. I think we'd just be overcomplicating it for not a lot of gain in my mind. I think that the difference in revenue on a year where they got 19 and a year where they got 20 is going to be marginal. It's always going to be around that number in a school, for example. Likewise with the different size strata units. I don't understand why we needed to add a brewery. Is someone planning on putting a brewery or winery in? Why did we pick that one? Why did we have to have a license for a brewery unless someone's put an application in to have one?
Because they use a heck of a lot more water than your average business.
I understand they do, but we don't have one.
As far as we know.
So why do we need to bother about trying to come up with a fee for something that's likely not to happen?
Well, through the chair, it's not really a bother. It's pretty simple model that the number comes up when you know what the cost is going to be. It's true that we don't know of any brewery now, and so the first iteration of this one would have nil or null. The idea is that the bylaw accommodates future water uses.
My suggestion is we should revisit this structure if something changes, and the way it currently is, with just the 4 categories or 5 or whatever it is, I think is adequate. That's my opinion. I think we're just adding complexity for no gain.
I'm fine with revisiting, or it previously had 4 categories, was that?
Yeah, the ones that I mentioned, the marina businesses.
Yeah.
Multifamily, school and single family residents. So the specific point I've been trying to address here is that people who live in the strata units that we have in Lions Bay, there are 3 stratas totaling 20 units. feel it's unfair to be paying the same amount for water, and it's now, it's approaching significance, $1,800 a year, when they have no garden and potentially, on average, less people in the premise. So that was trying to come up with a way to do that. However, you'll also see that I'm proposing that we charge the strata, not individual homeowners, because there's actually no legal basis to charge members of a strata for a utility. We charge the strata and they divvy up how they see fit. It's particularly troublesome because stratas, at least two of our stratas, water a lot and nobody pays for that.
Which stratus are those? You mean in the units?
No, in the common area.
In the common area, yeah.
No, they have gone.
Okay, I think your brewery, that's probably a little ways off, so it's not gonna apply, but I'm fine. Councilor Broughton, you had your hand up. Did you have
Yeah.
something?
Well, I think, I certainly in sense that the idea of keeping it as simple as possible. It seems like a good idea to have, rather than being trying to anticipate, for example, breweries as they become more popular, and they certainly are popular at this point in time, whether that's something that may happen, and rather than trying to chase it after the fact and look like it's a punitive measure.
Precisely.
This is kind of anticipating what might be there and kind of considering it. And I don't think it makes the thing particularly complex, so it's, I mean, it could be a brewery, it could be something else, it could be many different things, but you can't anticipate all the possibilities, but.
Well, the point about brewery and winery is they're particularly heavy water users.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
I understand.
There's a
So-
car
so-
washes.
so something-
There's a car washes and umpteen other things that may
Yeah.
actually come in here, so we don't know what people are gonna do. Someone wants to start washing cars as a business, we have to deal with it. From sorts of brewery, we have to deal with it. I think we should just keep what we've got and make it simple for now, and that's my opinion. Anyway. we'll move on.
okay, I like the idea of the strata units. It seems a little fair the way you've got it outlined. School, if they've got fewer kids, I don't have a problem with them paying less on that.
Yeah, certainly we're looking for ways to support the
Yeah,
school as well,
yeah.
and if it accurately reflects our costs, and that's.
And as far as the brewery, that's off in the future, so whether it's here or not.
Just, sorry.
Yeah, Councilor
Just to
Adams.
that point, I don't think the school's gonna think it's fair when they get one more student 1 year and end up paying more money. They're not gonna see that as fair. They're gonna see that as, well, I'm getting dinged because I've got an extra kid. That's the way it's gonna be read. So I really, anyway, I'll leave it at that. I've made my statement. I don't think.
Okay,
Okay.
before we call the question, Mr. Blackwell, anything to add on this?
I just have one comment if you don't mind, in regards to the school. This is the West Vancouver School District. We give them a flat rate of what it's going to cost them to operate a school within the village, and they pay. As a parent who has put 4 kids through the West Van School District, for lack of better terms, we are paying them for everything. The least they can do is just ensure that they're paying their fair share to operate a building, because it's not just kids washing their hands and flushing toilets. It's power washing, it's mopping floors, it's watering the community garden, it's all of those things. So it really, the student ratio seems to me to be the most moot point of that entire usage. So.
Good point.
All right, Mr. Blackwell, anything to add?
Thank you. Yeah, I've been down this road before, and I can tell you there's no silver bullet. Everybody has a different view on how to apply rates. I think council is, in my opinion, sort of going the right direction. There are all kinds of semantics that can be discussed with regard to, schools and whether bylaws should be proactive versus reactive. Of course, in my view, they should always be proactive. So there's always solutions to this, and normally consultation is always the best way to go. reaching out to the community, hearing their different viewpoints. We'll always inculcate our work with sort of more ground truth information. For instance, picking on schools, may say, let's charge or use a rate based on a square foot rate. How many square feet your school has is how we're going to bill. So there's lots of different ways to do it, but I think it's headed the right direction.
All right, anything you'd like to change on this, Mr.
Well, I mean,
Burr?
as I've asked for first reading, in order to sort of move things ahead, maybe if you want to amend that, the resolution on first reading with some direction as to amalgamating some of these categories, if those are the sticking points. I mean, there's been good points raised, and I get them. You can probably get a little more detail than you need. So I have no axe to grind here. These are really presented for council's consideration. So if council wants to come down on one side or the other, I don't really mind either way.
All right, any amendments before we call the question?
Yeah, I think maybe a different way to do it, Cole, is if you want to go back and re-look that with our comments in mind and see what you think.
The second reading.
For the second reading, Jamie makes a very good point. The amount of water used by the school is not dependent on how many kids they got. It's the size of the gardens and the grounds and everything.
I really recommend that we amalgamate those two.
Okay, so maybe look at which ones you can, and come back next time and give us options. I'll consider amalgamating these, but not these, and tell us why, and then we can give you clear direction.
Okay, thanks. And without being told, I will also try and gather some community input on that, just to give you a flavor of what the communities.
All right.
So if I could, I would recommend granting the first reading with direction to staff as is being discussed. But I don't know what Carl's timeline is, and Carl, forgive me if I'm putting you on the spot. Of course, if it doesn't work, please say that. But we can bring this back for discussion purposes to Committee of the Whole on December 3rd for further discussion before it comes back for second reading.
Okay, why don't we do, we'll move forward on the first reading. Carl can make some amendments and we can discuss it at the Committee of the Whole and also the next council meeting. Okay, all in favor of the first reading of bylaw 633?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Motion carried. Okay, thank you very much for that, Carl.
Thank you. Council.
And we will move to item number A3, holiday closure for discussion. Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. Apologies again for not having a camera. So this is back before council. You will recall last year there was a larger discussion around staff and sort of considerations, let's call it, at Christmas time, otherwise known as the holiday season, otherwise known as various other things. Last year, council decided to close the office during the period between Christmas and New Year's. This is back before you now to see what council's appetite is with regard to this question. For reference, Friday the 20th is the last full week that the office will be open. It would then otherwise be open the 23rd, 24th, closed on the 25th, 26th, in theory, open on the 27th, and so on and so forth. So not only is this period an awkward period, and it sees very little sort of foot traffic and so forth. It's a low production period. It's all chopped up because of these two key holidays, New Year's and Christmas. If you were seeking my recommendation on anything, my recommendation would be to close the office the final day in 2024 being the 20th and open right after New Year's. But I am seeking the direction of council.
Okay. Any comments, councilors? Councilor Abbott?
Yep. Okay. So Ross, to be clear, this would be a longer break than I think often happens, because we're Friday the 20th, staff would be expected to take vacation for the days that are non-holidays. Has there been any discussion at staff that they're comfortable to do that?
Mr. Blackwell?
Thank you. So last year,
The question is, do that thing I asked this last time, do they have the option if they do not want to use vacation days of actually working?
so thank you. So this was an issue discussed last time with council, how to manage that piece. If you recall, staff used to receive remuneration, Christmas remuneration. The union staff did. If you recall that matter last year, that was changed at my suggestion, and accordingly, council decided to pivot and sort of provide that same value with regard to days off. So last year it was paid days off. This year, I'm seeking direction on how council would like to see that office open, and how council wants to manage those two pieces, paid or non-paid, or a combination of the two.
How many days are we talking about, and what's the cost?
Mr. Blackwell, how many days are we referring to, and what is the cost is the question?
Thank you. I would have to talk to Mr. Cherkoff about the cost, but the number of days would be these: the 23rd, which is the Monday, the 24th. Usually on the 24th, it's only a half day worked anyway on Christmas Eve. The 27th, which is the Friday, the day after Boxing Day. Then it would just be the 30th and the 31st.
So 4.5 days.
5 days, it's a week.
Okay, do you want to speak with Mr. Cherkoff and come back to us just with the cost?
If that's council's preference, I'm happy to do that.
Council, what would you like?
I think it's significant, so I think we need to understand it.
Okay, you know, in general, I'm in favor of giving time off. It just matter what the costs are. So if you could come back to us with the costs.
I just have one suggestion, as well as maybe to put it out to staff if there is anyone who may be willing to be, on call in the event that a resident does need to access something in the office, or be available by email or any kind of thing, like a flexible kind of
A year-round issue.
work from home. Yeah, if that might mitigate a bit of the cost, if somebody wants to take the time, I'm in favor of people taking the time during the holidays. But if there is anybody that is willing to be available if necessary, and if we could designate specific staff members that if you sent in an email to, the general inquiry, that it would direct to that person, and we could have a commitment that they would be on top of, the residents' needs.
All right, that's a good suggestion. Councilor Abbott?
One other thing, and we discussed this last time, what's June 31st, December, utility tax. Yeah, is due, and if there's no one in the office, we need to make sure that we waive that requirement that is paid, because some people put a check through the door, and if it's not anyone to receive the check, then they're going to get penalized, and we did that last year, in previous years. Yeah, and just a personal observation from the corporate world that I live in. We get told to take these times off, but everyone has to use their vacation, or accrued and banked pay. So, okay.
All right, Ross, if you can report back to us, that would be great.
Thank you very much. Will do.
Okay, next item A4, proposed 2025 council meeting calendar. Any comments? That's on page 43.
Yeah, I have.
Okay, Councillor Abbott.
I'm just going back down to page 43. Give me 1 second. My first comment was, and I think this year it seems to have aligned worse than normal. The IC meeting, which is meant to be the 3rd Thursday of the month, was kind of selected because we wanted it between the committee of the whole and the council meeting, not in the same week. But this month, oddly enough, the 3rd Thursday ends up in the same week, consistently on, I think, 6 or 7 of the 8 months as the council meeting. So can we change that one? I don't know how you want to word it, so that it is on the Thursday between the council meeting and the committee of the whole meeting. Which basically means, I think in 1, 2, 3, 4 cases, it has to be a week earlier. It has to be a week earlier. The one exception might need to be on the June meeting, which then it would mean it would overlap. So the LGLMA, it just depends who's going to that. So can we do that?
Okay, Ross, any problem with moving that?
If you're looking at the calendar, you'll understand what I'm saying.
Thank you. No, this is why it's before you, is to make sure that we can deal with all these little preferences and wrinkles and so on and so forth. So that feedback's really helpful, and we will be happy to make those changes.
Okay, any other changes?
I think everyone knows I'm going to make this pitch, but I'm going to make the pitch anyway. I still think it would be better to have 2 council meetings a month. And if we don't have any, if we have some matters on the agenda that are better dealt with the committee of the whole, we break out to a committee of the whole. I still think it gives us that opportunity of making some decisions twice a month, instead of always have to hold them off for 4 weeks, or in some cases 5 weeks. So I would like to hear others' opinion. I think there's been several times this year when I said, "Yep, I wish we just didn't have a committee of the whole meeting on Tuesday. We could actually make this decision now." And it would mean for a lot less special meetings. We had a bunch of special meetings at one stage earlier this year, and this way we wouldn't need them. So that's my appeal to my fellow council, and maybe hear everyone else's opinion.
All right, I've just got a couple of matters. One, if we can add the audit and finance committee meeting, we can just book that in. We usually have it at about 4 or 4:30, but if we could block out about an hour and a half. And I would suggest that we put it before the infrastructure committee meeting. That way there's an opportunity to have some cross pollination there.
Can I ask specifically what the committee would be looking for with regard to that? Do you want the auditor there, or what are you asking for?
No, just the audit and finance committee.
Finance committee, yeah.
Yeah, but what information specifically are you seeking to have made available?
No information. I just want to block out that time. Should the audit and finance committee get together?
I see.
We regularly get together, and the last meeting was set just before the finance or the infrastructure committee.
Gotcha.
So it's just blocking out the time. There may be instances where we say, look, there's nothing to discuss, and we won't be meeting that month.
Okay, happy to do that.
Okay, and in regards to the council meeting, I'm fine with keeping it once a month with the committee of the whole filling in. It just gives us a little bit more, a little less, I guess, formality to it. So that's my opinion, but others, Councillor Broughton?
I'm okay with the schedule as recommended, with the understanding that if there are issues that we would activate the committee of the whole as a special council meeting as part of that, if there's situations that come up, but also there's, I think we've fairly effectively, used the special council meetings. They come up with, they're not, frivolously created by any means. There's a purpose for them. And whether we have 2 meetings a month or not, there will still be special council meetings. But I would encourage as much, whenever possible, that if there was a need for a special council meeting, that it would go into that committee of the whole slot.
All right,
Together with the committee of the whole, maintaining the committee of the whole, because that's a different format and it's a very important format.
okay, thanks for that. Councillor Cunliffe?
I have a question to the CAO, through you. How, technically speaking, if we have a committee of the whole scheduled, how difficult, seeing that something on the agenda for the committee of the whole may want to result in a discussion and a decision by council at the time, can we morph that into a council meeting? Or does it need to be the reverse, where we schedule a council, like a regular council meeting, and then morph that into a committee of the whole? If it doesn't seem necessary to have a actual regular council meeting.
Mr. Blackwell?
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Cunliffe. It is quite common for municipalities to have committee of the whole in advance of regular council, or in regional districts. The same sort of structure applies, particularly with those communities that have large agendas, and I'm talking 500 pages up to 1,000-page agendas. It's a lot of work, and some of that work requires on sort of what I would call time-sensitive decisions. So it's common that they will have them back to back, committee of the whole, and then recommendations that move forward from the committee of the whole to council can then be deliberated in council. That's very quite common.
So just the mechanics of that, Mr. Blackwell, if something comes up, do we generally, a couple of days prior to the meeting, would we slot in a council meeting alongside that committee of the whole, or can we do it on the fly?
Thank you. No, you can't do it on the fly. You would have to give formal notice. But this is where there can be some value in agenda preparation with the CAO and mayor sitting down to talk about these things. Normally the mayor is connected to council in such a way as the mayor can say, look, I think council is going to be inclined to want to move forward on item X. So it would be good to have a scheduled council meeting following committee of the whole. If that isn't the case, if something comes out of left field during a committee of the whole meeting, it's not a big deal to schedule. If it's something is very time sensitive, and it's not very common that things are that time sensitive, but if it were the case, there's nothing wrong with setting a special council meeting. You have to give 24 hours notice. So anything beyond that, 1 day, 2, 3 days, 5 days, a week, whatever, we can schedule a special council meeting to deal with those one-offs.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Broughton?
If something really urgent came up in a committee of the whole meeting, though, we could invoke the unanimous consent of council to call a meeting without notice, I believe. But that would be fairly extraordinary. But we certainly, I think, once or twice we've all agreed to have a special council meeting.
We've done it once.
Once, yeah.
Okay, so worst case scenario, we can schedule one the next day
Yeah.
or
Give-
shortly after. If we
Give
have to.
notice, 2 days notice, whatever.
Yeah.
From what I'm hearing, I'm still thinking it's just more efficient to have a plain council meeting. If there's no decisions to be made, we open and close it in 5 minutes and it's there.
Okay.
If I could, the only downside of that is there's a lot of work that goes into agenda prep and so forth. So, we have such a small staff. I got to be a little bit conscious of staff time, and where we can avoid unnecessary work, I think it's wise to do so.
All right. Why don't we have a straw vote? Who's in favor of keeping the agenda with one council meeting and one committee of the whole, and subbing in a special meeting if needed?
And activating that committee of the whole as a full meeting
Yeah. Okay.
as.
Okay, question, if we had the committee of the whole agenda, let's say 72 to 96 hours prior, 72 being the ideal, that council could then digest the content, and if we saw fit to schedule a council meeting paired with the council of the whole, that would give us the 24 hours requirement. That would be an ask for staff to provide us with those agendas in a bit more time than we've currently been receiving them. So I guess that's a question through you, Mayor, to the CAO.
Mr. Blackwell, I think we have done that in the past, haven't we?
That's very doable. The agendas are issued to council typically on Fridays. So that gives council the weekend, obviously I'm sure council's absolutely going to be reviewing that agenda Friday night. But failing that over the course of the weekend, and if there is some communication before the end of the day on Monday, we can provide that 24-hour notice of a council meeting.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for that. Okay, so all in favor of one and one?
It's a straw vote for one.
Straw vote.
One. Yeah.
Are we voting on adopting the council
No,
meeting
it's just a straw
calendar?
vote.
It's just a straw vote and
Just a
One or two
flavor?
meetings, Jamie.
1 or 2 meetings, Jamie.
1 or 2 regular council meetings a month.
I'm happy with the one and the one.
okay.
Okay.
I am as well.
Straw vote.
Vote no longer required.
Okay,
Okay, good.
all right, we'll move on to the next item. Hang on.
Oh,
Okay.
was there a
committees.
motion? Was there a motion then for
Did you need a motion, Ross, on that?
for that calendar?
Thank you. No, pursuant to Councillor Abbott's comments, we'll bring a revised version to the next council meeting, which, by the way, if you don't want it to be December 17th, we should know that fairly soon. So think about that between now and the committee of the whole on the 3rd. And if you want to change it from the 17th, we're going to need to know that. But we'll bring it back either to a committee of the whole for more discussion, or if it's just that one thing, we can just bring it back for adoption at the next council meeting.
All right,
Sorry, can I,
Councillor Abbott?
one last observation, comment maybe. I see we blocked out the LGMLA and UBCM meetings, makes sense. Some, maybe not all of us this year because they're both in remote locations, so someone will be going to those. But why have we blocked out the FCM in Ottawa? Is there any intention that anyone's going to that? Or is that for a future discussion in the budget?
If I may.
Yeah.
It was
Crystal.
simply based on last year's, it was on last year's calendar, so,
Okay.
and last year was, or this year rather, it was locally, it was somewhere.
Okay,
with
no
these.
conscious decision about anyone going to Ottawa. Okay, thank you.
So I'm happy to remove it, make it less cluttered.
I'm fine with removing.
Okay.
Okay. All right, with that, we'll move on to, there's no committee. Okay, mayor, none, emergency, none, resolutions. Move right down to correspondence. Any comments on the correspondence listed on page 46?
Am I on duty? Am I on? So to me now, isn't
I
it?
think it's either.
Yeah, it must be me.
If I could,
Yeah.
Yeah,
thank you. My recommendation is just to pull any specific items that you feel like
This won't take long.
discussed.
yeah,
Relax, won't take long.
okay. Over to Councillor Abbott, any items?
All right,
pulled?
No, I'll just comment quickly. The first one, I think we've actually done just by publishing it here. We've done what they asked, so that one's taken care of. Got no comments on the SIT report. And then the TransLink one, I read all of the stuff. The TransLink one has nothing relevant to Lions Bay, so we don't need any of those. I do want to talk about the resident correspondence. So I think resident Monica Gerwitz has raised a very important suggestion here.
Sorry, what page is that on? Oh.
58.
58, yeah.
The last page of the agenda package. And I think we've all noticed this every year when we get sort of, well, every year after fall, the leaves are sort of falling off the trees. There's no post barriers or jersey barriers down the middle of the highway. The drainage from one side of the road camber to the other is always blocked, creates big pools of water. Here last week there was someone that was flipped over because of it. And I observed La Capilano out there cleaning underneath them. The resident suggestion was you should have bigger holes underneath those so they're less likely to block, which sounds to me like a really good idea and almost like a no-brainer as to why they haven't thought of that before. She's asking who the councillor is that could take this up with the Ministry of Transport. And we had this highway committee that was looking at aspects like this. So maybe Councillor Broughton wants to take that on. I think it's something we should certainly question and investigate.
Councillor Broughton?
I'd be very comfortable talking to probably Miller Capilano initially. Are we suggesting the entire length of the highway have the concrete barriers replaced?
I think what she's suggesting, and I've seen it, and we've probably all seen it, is some of those barriers have holes in them. And there is holes that are quite a bit larger, like maybe 6 inches tall and 3 feet or something, rather than just small. Yeah, because the small ones get plugged up with leaves.
Right, okay.
If I could?
Yeah, Mr. Blackwell?
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Abbott, this is certainly something I think staff can have a conversation with MOTI on, specifically, given that we are in fairly, at this point, regular conversations on a number of matters with MOTI district manager, so we can add this to the list. That's not to say that's the only course of action, but we can also take that on.
Yeah, well, that's a good suggestion. I think it maybe makes sense to start with staff. And if it doesn't get done and becomes political, then we can decide to do it another way.
Yeah. If you thought it would be helpful for me to make contact, I could certainly do that as well.
I think hammering them from both sides would be very beneficial.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm particularly sensitive on the subject because the only car accident I've ever had in my life was as a result of almost exactly the same circumstance on the upper levels highway near Taylor Way, where at first rainfall after the summer and the drains were blocked and massive flood. So.
All right, Mr. Blackwell, follow up on that, and if you need Councillor Broughton's assistance, he's more than available. And sorry, Councillor Cunliffe, did you have something to add?
Yeah, if I may, I would suggest that doubling down here would probably be the most effective course of action. If Councillor Broughton wouldn't mind echoing staff's concerns and residents' concerns, I think that'll draw more attention because it is particularly dangerous, and Ms. Gerwitz made a very good point.
All right, thanks for that. Anything else on the correspondence?
If I could, sorry, just a little point on that, elected official to elected official. So staff, MOTI staff won't respond to elected officials, so you'll have to reach out to the minister.
Okay.
Well, why don't we start with the staff and get a report back?
All right, thanks. We'll move on to public questions, comments in the gallery.
Rick? You're the only one.
Okay. All right, online, anyone wish to comment, please raise your hand. Okay, no comments. Motion to adjourn meeting.
So moved.
Okay, second. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much good meeting,
Thank you very much.
very efficient.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Have a good evening.
All right, thanks, bye now.